The wind had teeth that day, sharp and dry, scraping across the boards of the Abilene auction yard. Dust danced in the air like it was alive, curling round the boots of men who'd seen too much and cared too little. Noon sun blazed down mean as a hangman's glare, and every shadow looked like it was trying to hide something. The crowd was restless, ranch hands, drifters, gamblers, and them who just liked watchin' misery sold for coin. They gathered close around the stand, spurs jingling, cigars smolderin', voices low and hard. Then came the girl. She weren't much more than 20, but the kind of life she'd known had carved sorrow deep into her face. Her name, no one spoke it at first, not till later. They just called her, the woman. She was heavy with child, her belly round beneath a faded calico dress, the kind a woman wears when she's out of choices. Her wrists were bound, and her head hung low, brown hair streaked with dust. The auctioneer, a rat-faced feller named Silas Cray, grinned through yellow teeth and tapped his cane on the wood. "Gentlemen," he bellowed, "this here's a special lot. Strong girl, fair looks, good with cookin' and cleanin'. Circumstances unfortunate, but that ain't no business o' yours. What matters is she's worth a fine price to any man who's got the coin." The men laughed. Someone hollered, "Ain't she 'bout to drop a young'un?" Cray spat to the side. "That's the truth. But the babe'll come and go, and you'll still have yourself a fine piece of property." A hush rippled through the yard. Not pity, not mercy, just the quiet before a low kind of evil. That's when he showed up. Elias Rourke rode in from the North Trail, dust all over him, a big man with a long coat and eyes the color of cold river water. Folks called him, the Hawk, out in the territories, rancher, drifter, sometime lawman, sometimes worse. He'd come down from his spread near Dead Mesa lookin' for a few head of cattle, not trouble. But trouble's what the West gives when it's got nothin' else left. He hitched his horse near the post and watched. The bidding started low, $5, then $6. A drunk miner raised it to 10, slurring his words. A gambler in a velvet vest sneered and called 11. The girl flinched at each shout, holding her belly as though the child inside could feel the shame rollin' through her bones. 20, Elias said, his voice low but steady. Heads turned. The crowd went quiet a beat. Cray blinked. $20. Well now, that's a fine offer indeed. Any man wanna go higher? No one spoke. Sold, Cray said, slapping the cane against the stand. To the gentleman in the hat. Elias stepped forward, laid the coins on the table, and untied the girl's wrists himself. Her skin was cold, her breath shaky. "You got a name?" he asked. She looked up slow, eyes gray and hollow. "Mary," she whispered. "Well, Mary," he said, "reckon you're comin' with me. We'll get you fed and seen to proper." He led her to his horse, careful as if she were made of glass. Folks in the crowd watched him like he was a man gone mad. No one bought women to save him. Not out here. They rode out of town as the sun slid behind the hills, turning the sky the color of blood and smoke. Dash dash dash. The trail was long and mean. Mary said little, and Elias didn't press. He gave her his coat when the night turned cold, and made camp near the river bend where the cottonwoods whispered like ghosts. When the pains came, they came sudden. She doubled over, breathing hard, tears streaking the dirt from her cheeks. Elias cursed under his breath, built up the fire, and ran for water. He weren't no doctor, but he'd helped a mare birth her foal once, and he figured the principle couldn't be all that different. It was a hard night. The stars burned bright and cruel above him, and the coyotes sang far off in the dark. But come dawn, the cries of pain turned to the cries of a newborn, small, fierce, alive. Mary lay weak but smilin', the baby wrapped in Elias's duster. "It's a boy," she said, voice soft as the breeze. "Reckon he's got spirit," Elias muttered, looking down at the tiny face. "You gonna keep him close?" Tears welled in her eyes. "He's all I got." Elias nodded slow. "Then that's enough." They stayed camped 3 days. He hunted, she healed, and the baby, she called him Samuel, slept in a basket of old saddlecloth. By the time they reached Dead Mesa, Mary could ride again, though the weariness clung to her like a shadow. Dash dash dash. The ranch was a lonely place, white and quiet, fenced in by desert and wind. Elias didn't talk much about himself, but Mary learned he'd lost his wife years back, some fever that came through the plains. He kept to work, cattle, fences, a busted windmill he cursed at daily, but every so often, he'd glance at her and the child with a look that weren't hard to read. She cooked, cleaned, mended. Not 'cause he asked, but 'cause she wanted to. The house began to feel like something living again, smoke in the chimney, laughter soft and rare, but real. Still, the past ain't a thing that stays buried. One evening, a writer came, Silas Cray, with 2 hard cases behind him. He grinned that same yellow grin. "Evenin', Rourke," he said. "Words, you got something that belongs to me." Elias stood on the porch, thumb hooked near his revolver. "Ain't nothin' on this land that's yours." Cray chuckled. "That woman was sold under contract. Terms weren't met. She's still my property." Mary stepped out then, baby in her arms. Fear flashed in her eyes, but she stood her ground. "You touch her," Elias said, "and you won't live to spit after." Cray's smirk faded. His hand twitched near his gun. "You threatenin' me, Rourke." "I ain't threatenin', I'm promisin'." The air went still. Then came the crack, 2, 3 shots in the span of a heartbeat. When the smoke cleared, Cray lay face down in the dust, and his men were ridin' hard the other way. Elias's gun still smoked at his side. Mary sank to her knees, shaken. Elias holstered the Colt slow. "Ain't no one gonna own you again," he said, his voice rough as gravel. She looked up at him, tears glintin' in her eyes. "Why'd you do it? You didn't even know me." Elias looked out at the horizon, red sky bleedin' into the desert. "Once had someone taken from me 'cause I didn't stand up soon enough. Swore I'd never let that happen again. Years passed. The boy grew tall and strong, ridin' horses before he could tie his boots. Mary worked the homestead beside Elias, and though folks in town whispered, sayin' things about a rancher and the woman he'd bought, neither of 'em paid it no mind. They weren't lovers in the way folks talk. They were something steadier. Something built on debt and honor, sorrow and grace. Maybe that's what love really was out west, not words, just deeds. One evening, long after the windmill was fixed and the fences stood straight, Mary watched the sunset from the porch. Elias joined her, leanin' on the post, hat low. "You ever think about that day?" she asked. "Every time the wind blows," he said. She smiled faintly. "You saved me." He looked out toward the darkening hills. "Nah, we saved each other." The baby she'd carried, the one born under starlight and pain, was a young man now, learnin' to run cattle and rope wild horses. The land had turned harsh again, as the West always did, but life had found a way to keep breathin'. Sometimes, when the wind came from the east, Elias swore he could still hear the auction bell ringin' faint in the distance. But now it didn't sound cruel, just far away, like a ghost that had finally learned how to rest. And if you rode past Dead Mesa on a summer's night, you might see the glow of a lantern in the window of a ranch house, the soft cry of a whippoorwill carryin' on the breeze, and a woman hummin' to herself while a man sat quiet nearby, polishin' his gun, starin' into the fire, the 2 of 'em bound not by law or paper, but by something the frontier couldn't take. The West didn't give happy endings. But it gave truth, and grit, and a kind of love that lasted longer than most men's memories. And that, friend, is worth more than gold in any auction yard.